Yeah? Okay. I'm actually, I'm shocked to be the voice of doom, because there's so much enthusiasm around all of this technology, and certainly as a company person, I feel it. But I did think it was important, because this is the space in which I work, to really talk about the government's role when it comes. We talked about a constraining role, and one of the constraints that we see as a company is what's the government's role when it comes to ownership of this data, and then we as a company being sort of the intermediary. So I'll talk. So what I'll do is I'll spend 5 minutes talking a little bit about some of the challenges that we face as a company, and hoping that, some of the conversation gets to ideas on how to address those challenges. One of the issues that we face is that the more and more location data that the more and more companies and people and governments rely upon location data, the more that data becomes an opportunity for governments to use it in a benign way to solve crimes, but also not in a benign way. I think when we have these conversations, we often have these conversations against the backdrop of a rule of law society, against the backdrop of a society where the government is not broken, and where law enforcement is not necessarily against the rule of law or civil rights. I think there are a number of questions I'd like to pose, and one is, what is the role, what do we want the role of the company to be when we are the repository for all of this data? And we often have people who are intentionally or unintentionally submitting this data, and we as a company are in between, and we operate in a global context, so not just in the United States, not just in Canada, not just in whatever rule of law country you can think of, but we operate in a global context, and we have governments who are interested in data in a way that could be contra international human rights norms. Nigel referenced public good. I think that's a very useful concept, but if you think about the concept of public good in particular jurisdictions, what does a company do when the idea of public good within a particular jurisdiction is against international human rights norms? And we are in a position where we're collecting all of this data. I think the other point is that how do we inform consumers in a way that we can actually say that there has been informed consent? One question that I always ask is how many people, and this may be a very unique crowd, but how many people read terms of services? So if you're hitting yes on an app and it says, okay, have you read the terms? How many people print it out and go through it and highlight it and look up the definitions and say, aha, now I am consenting to this? I mean, how many have? No one. And this is maybe you. This is a fairly informed crowd, but if you think about the vast majority of people, they're giving access to all kinds of data, and the addition of location data gives much more data than people are even aware of. I'll talk just for 1 second about Flickr. So Flickr is a photo app that Yahoo has. One of the things that as cameras and as phones get more and more sophisticated is that there's a huge amount of location data that people are able to upload, and people are uploading it with consent, but they may not necessarily know exactly what that consent means. And so one example we have is Iran. We have a huge Flickr community in Iran, even though we are not, we can't target Iran for export control reasons. And so during the Green Revolution in Iran, people started using Flickr to upload images because the news press media was kicked out, and Flickr and other online platforms were sort of the only way that people could get the story out about what is going on in Iran. So you had people who became basically accidental activists. They were uploading pictures, and they became sort of the voice for people in Iran. We had one Flickr user who began uploading images. His images got picked up by a number of mainstream media, so they were emblazoned across the world in different newspapers. We highlighted him because we thought this was an incredible story of an ordinary person doing extraordinary things. As a result of the media attention, and as a result of the fact that there is information that he had willingly shared, but he had his name. You have the information that is pulled from the camera, but then you also have the information that he has willingly shared. Because of that, the Iranian authorities were able to find him, to arrest him, and to put him in prison. And so then the question then is, what is the role of the company? How do we properly inform people? How do we make sure that people know that, yes, it's an amazing thing that all of these tools have the capacity to do all of these interesting things, but what are you consenting to when you use these tools? So I'm actually going to cede a little bit of my time, only because I do think that it's very important to actually have this conversation, because it's something we're grappling with. At Yahoo, we have a business and human rights program. We do human rights impact assessments so that as we're creating products, as we're creating platforms, we're trying to figure out what the human rights impact is. In the case of Flickr, we've created something called geofencing. So the user can, as opposed to the data from their particular image being automatically pulled, the user can decide what information they want to share where. So if you're a user in Iran and you want to post a picture and you want someone in Austria or you want someone in the US to know the location of the picture, but you don't want anyone in Iran to know where you are, you can set up your profile in such a way so that particular image is protected. However, how do you communicate to every single casual Flickr user that that's something that they can do in plain English? So I'll stop there only because I think it's a lot of questions, and I do hope that this panel gets into the possibility and the promise of all of these technologies, but also what is a company, are your ideas for what a company should do when we're in the middle of sort of public good and international human rights norms?